Journalism is journalism. It's not just numbers. So a lot of times people, when they think of data journalism and start with using numbers, they get scared. They see this giant spreadsheet and don't know what the Excel formulas are, don't know what these lines of code are, and just don't even want to go near it. Well, first things first, it's journalism. So think about the story behind the data. Think about the people that you're talking about. That is the most important thing I want you to remember. The most important thing to keep in mind is the people. So when you're telling a story in video, when you're telling a story in a graphic, when you're telling a story in a print newspaper story or an online story, it doesn't matter what medium you're telling it on. The most important thing you want to remember is the people. And the thing is when you're talking about data, oftentimes you'll have a headline that says 50 people found this, 50 people found in this study were found to be, against this mayor or governor. Well, that number doesn't provide any context if you don't actually have anecdotes or people that you've gone and interviewed and talked about. So, So that's a thing to keep in mind is the people that you're talking to and interviewing while doing data stories. 2, you should find a topic you care about. I'm not saying you have to be like really obsessed and like hugging the story that you're working on, but you should be passionate about it. I want you to really care about the topic you're working on, because if you care about the topic you are writing or doing research on, then the story will be all the more better. The stories also will be more well thought out, and you'll have data and angles that you never thought about previously because you actually care about the story that you're writing about instead of just getting an assignment from your editor and not even caring about what the story is. Another thing to keep in mind with this is if the data doesn't exist, is this problematic? So I'm not sure if this makes sense just looking at this question like this, but if you're going to a government organization and you're requesting data and the data isn't there that you're asking for, could that be problematic? So that could be something that you want to keep in mind when you're requesting data or looking for data stories. If it doesn't exist, maybe it's problematic. Third thing, you should be skeptical. So, you should ask questions. As any good journalist does, ask lots of questions. And I'm not just saying to ask questions to people, but you should also be asking questions to your data. So you might be thinking, like, this person's crazy, she's asking me to talk to my computer and ask questions to numbers on my screen. Well, that's what programming is. You're asking questions to your data and numbers by presenting a set of queries. So when you interview your data, think of it as a person, because in the end of the day, it is a person or a thing that you're counting. It's an object, right? So when you're thinking of data stories, again, it goes back to my first point of remember that when you're looking at data stories, it goes back to the people. So just as you interview a person, interview your data. And be conscious. So what do I mean by this? I mean that you should be really conscious of the way that you present your information and talk about your stories. I don't want you to just throw numbers in people's faces. If you do that, they won't really understand. You need to provide context. So like I said previously, in headlines, a lot of times you'll see stories that just throw a big number in the headline and really don't explain the number and why people should care about that. If you don't explain it, people won't care. And in the end of the day, people aren't spending that much time on your story. So if you're just giving them one number and not showing them who the human is behind that story, then it's not really going to be helpful for them. Number 5, you should plan ahead. So when you're working on any data story, you often, and I often find myself doing this, where I'll keep digging and digging and digging because I'm really passionate about the data that I'm looking at, and then I find myself in this giant hole because I've just kept going down this hole and I forgot about everything else that was going on around me, and I needed to plan ahead so that my editor, when the editor asks me, hey, when's your story ready, or when's that graphic gonna be ready, I know when to have that done and not be stuck in my little world. And you should have these conversations early and with your team. And you should overestimate the time that you think it might take. So if you think your graphic is gonna take a week, give yourself 2 weeks. If you think your script is gonna take a few days to run, give yourself a few more days. You always wanna give yourself some buffer room, because just in case your script goes wrong or the website that you're scraping goes down or something happens, you wanna be prepared for that. And my 6th point is, this is a really important one, you should document your work. So if any of you have heard my workshop that I gave yesterday, I talked a lot about this. I am a big proponent of documentation. You should be documenting your work in any and all forms of documentation. So when you're working on a story, you should have what's called a data diary or a data dictionary for your projects. So when you have a spreadsheet like this, you should have explanation of what each column is, and as well as a data diary that describes exactly what queries you did every single day and what questions you were asking your data and what was going on in your mind. This is really helpful for if you go on vacation or if you leave for the weekend and then come back and wonder, why did I run that query and what bug was it? It's very helpful for that. I've seen some reporters do screenshots of their errors and write little notes on Post-its and a notepad or write an email to themselves reminding them things. Don't do that. Just keep a data diary, keep it all in one place, and you'll be prepared for any stories that you're working on. And my last one, 7, fact check. So this one is kind of self-explanatory, but you should fact check every single thing that you're doing. Not just the data that you're analyzing, but also fact check the questions and the information that people give you. You want to make sure you triple check your work, because if you do it once and then you find an error the second time, maybe you should have someone else look at it. You can do this by, if you're programming in R or Python, you can have the other person on your team program in another language and reproduce your work. This will also hold you really accountable. And take time away from your work. So you might think, okay, I'm really in this project, I'm really interested in this story that I'm doing on, I don't know, climate change. And you're really into it, and all you think about is climate change, and all you talk about with your friends is climate change, and it's what you do for a whole year and talk about. Well, that's great, but you need to take time away from your work as well. You want to step away from your project that you're working on, so you think of new angles and new story ideas for that project. And last, I know I said there were 7, but I have a bonus, because I hear you guys like Simpsons here in Argentina. You should have fun. I want you guys to remember that data journalism is great, and it's a form of telling journalism and a form of telling stories, but it doesn't have to be all death and destruction. It can be fun, and you should really enjoy the work you're doing. And if not, you should learn to think about what other possibilities there are and what stories might exist that you can work on. So thank you, and my slides are available here, and I'm available on Twitter if you have any questions. Thank you.